Don't you wish there was somebody there to tell you when you were living in the good old days? And I'm talking about the old school days, the sort of boot up your PS3 or Xbox or PC and play Bad Company 2 till your eyes bled. Or the stay indoors whilst it's raining outside and play some Battlefield 3 with the boys. Or some Battlefield 4, or any of the 10 years of Battlefield games that have released from 2010 all the way up until 2020, and there's not going to be another one until 2021, which is crazy. Now in this video today, I want to talk to you about my Battlefield game of the decade, and talk about what I want the future of Battlefield to look at. We're in an incredibly weird area and generation of gaming now, where the world has changed. It's no longer buy a disc and play a game. It's, you know, here's a live service game that's going to last for years and years. It's long-term projects now, and video games are competing for your time, much like Netflix and Amazon are competing for your subscription fee. And we've even seen monthly subscription fees come into gaming. For me, Battlefield 4 will always be the game of the decade, the Battlefield game of the decade. I'm talking about a game here that I spent thousands of hours playing for. And really, if you think about it, when you spend £60–80 on a game, I don't think many people are expecting to spend 1,000 hours on it. You know, that's a crazy amount of time to get out of such a seemingly small amount of money. And I don't mean to say that in the sense that games are cheap. I mean that in the sense that for paying for a video game around about $50–60, whatever you happen to do, to end up playing it for such a serious amount of time, you know, it's crazy entertainment value. For me, Battlefield 4 has the sandbox environment that really typifies everything Battlefield should be. You know, we're talking about a game that had land, air, sea. We're talking about a game that you could spend hundreds of hours in with your friends. We're talking about a game that was objective-based, a modern shooter, and really something that for me kind of identified what the franchise was. You know, Battlefield 3 was doing pretty well, but there was just something about 4. Battlefield 4 was a crazy kind of departure in the sense that it took elements of Battlefield that felt very clunky, didn't feel very fluid, and put it into a brand new package. Battlefield 3, I think, sometimes the criticism I would say is that sometimes it felt like it was on rails, you know? We didn't really always have the aerial dynamic. In some games it felt like tanks were very dominant, in other games it felt like infantry were very dominant. I think Battlefield 4 was probably the first one that put everything into one big sandbox and said, you know what? Best of luck. Only in Battlefield 4, as far as I'm aware, can you fly into the air in a helicopter, or a jet, jump out of it, RPG another aerial vehicle, land on the ground, blow up some shit, kill some people, and jump in another vehicle. It's such an amazing kind of transitional game. It's a kind of game that you can play for hours and hours upon end, and something new will happen every single time. And this is something that I really found special about Battlefield 4, and it has been the same for Battlefield games more previously, but this one especially. I think Battlefield 4 nailed the formula of Battle Royales before Battle Royales were a thing. If you think about a Battle Royale game, you can play that game hundreds of times and thousands of things will happen. If you play Battlefield 4, you can play in the same maps hundreds of times over, and you'll get 121 different things happening in every single match, and that for me is what made it so special. You had some games where you could snipe a helicopter out of the sky with a tank, other games where you would fly a jet into a building, and the chances and possibilities of what could happen in a game were truly endless. That's not to say that the other Battlefield games are necessarily bad or worse. I just think Battlefield 4 did a really good job of capturing everything that the franchise was about. I think Battlefield 3, without a shadow of a doubt, has some of the best DLC expansion packs for any Battlefield game going. I think Bad Company 2 shows that infantry gameplay and rush and video modes, and specific modes for these video games, can be executed to a near perfection level state, and I think that's what made that game incredibly special. And I think even games like Battlefield 1, which wasn't necessarily a game that I personally enjoyed, showed that Battlefield can do different things. You know, you can teach an old dog new tricks, you can take it to some new theaters, you can have this grand war, and even introduce new things like grand operations, which I'm sure will likely even be a thing in modern shooters when the next modern Battlefield comes out. So that's why it's my Battlefield game of the decade. I think even though it was a game that wasn't perfect, even though it was a game that sometimes ran really badly when it first started, even though it was a game that was broken at launch, and even though it was a game that wasn't always, you know, the best thing, it wasn't always the #1 game, it was just one of those things that you could just play for hours and hours and hours on end, and I know many of you guys have similar stories across Battlefield 4, across Battlefield 3, across Bad Company 2, but there was something about that gameplay loop, there was something about the sandbox environment that Battlefield 4 had offered that was truly compelling and mind-blowing. And think about it, Battlefield 4 released 6 years ago. 6 whole years ago, back in 2013. It's going to be 7 years next year. Imagine what a modern shooter like Battlefield 4 would look like today, with graphical updates, with changes to how games are made, with the new generation of consoles coming in. I think it's truly mind-boggling what we might be in store for the next title, and I think they might be able to shift gears and make the next Battlefield game even more crazy than the ones that came before it. Now, I know a lot of people say that, well, you can still play Battlefield 4 and 3 today. By modern standards of things, these games are quite dated now. You know, you only need to look at the movement system of something like Battlefield 5 to realise how clunky Battlefield 4 was. You only need to look at some of the gun customization systems in games like Modern Warfare and Escape from Tarkov to realise that Battlefield 4 could have done even more things with its customization options. And I think more and more now we're seeing the sort of finer details of video games are becoming what make them special. Gunsmith, for example, in Modern Warfare, is something that makes it a very interesting game in its own sense. And I think with something like a gunsmith system in the next Battlefield that happens to be modern, and a customization system, and all the things that I think people just want to see from a modern military shooter, and a Battlefield game, you know, we're talking about a Battlefield game here. We're talking about a sandbox environment, a multiplayer shooter that can do things that no other multiplayer shooter can do, can create moments that are mind-blowing and really let you sink thousands of hours into a game without feeling like you ever have, because there's just so many unique experiences you've had within that individual map, within that individual mode, be it Rush, Conquest, or anything in between. And I really want to see a return to that golden age. Now, yes, it's always fun to look at the past as this wonderful thing, and often you don't realise when you're in a good age of video games. And I'm going to remember games like Battlefield 1 and 5 for things that they've changed. But ultimately, I really want to see another modern military Battlefield shooter, which for me is Battlefield's home. We're talking about an age-old franchise that started in the World War era, and we're talking about a franchise that's been everywhere from Vietnam to the future. But I really feel as though the homage, the home for Battlefield, has been that excellent sandbox military experience. And if you bring that into the 2021 era, if you bring it into the new decade, with brand new upgrades, with brand new systems like Gunsmith in Modern Warfare, with customization systems, and with a season pass style setup that we've seen in other games when they have time to do is a successful formula, then I think we'd be on to a winner. I think we'd be on to a Battlefield game that people wouldn't stop playing. I think Modern Warfare is doing everything that the next Battlefield game should be doing in their next title. And with the added years of development onto the next title that they have received now, because the next one is until 2021, I truly believe all of these things are possible, and I think Battlefield can be this mind-blowing, incredible game. Everybody remembers what it was like when they saw Siege of Shanghai happen for the first time in the trailer. When that tower dropped, I think everybody thought, wow, we're really into a new generation of what is possible. And I really want to see another Siege of Shanghai level moment. You know, something that they show us in a trailer that makes me go, holy shit, you know, this is what video games are capable of now. And I really hope we see something like that soon. But anywho folks, that's it. My top Battlefield game of the decade and my explanations and reasons why. Let me know what you think in the comment section below, and as always, thank you for watching.